Fintech Chatter Podcast, brought to you by Tier 1 People, the leaders in executive search for Fintech ventures.
How do you get to 50 million customers? That's the question I get answered by this week's guest on Fintech Chatter Podcast. I'm Dexter Cousins, your host and the founder of Tier 1 People, the executive search firm dedicated to connecting high-growth fintech companies like Wise, Revolut, and Lendy to exceptional fintech leaders. Today's guest is Matt Baxby, Australia's CEO of Revolut. Matt makes a welcome return to the show to share their growth plans in Australia and celebrate his 5th year anniversary with Revolut. It's an incredible journey going from 4 million to 50 million customers. Make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts or subscribe on YouTube for more great interviews with fintech leaders like Matt. I'm joined today by a good old friend of the show, Matt Baxby, CEO of Revolut. Matt, welcome back.
Dexter, fantastic to be here. This might be my 3rd appearance. So
I think it's actually your 4th.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, last one was 2 years ago. So yeah, Matt, Revolut should need no introduction. But for anybody who's listening who hasn't or isn't aware of Revolut, can you tell our listeners a little bit about the big problem that you solve?
Yeah, I guess the big problem we're trying to solve is a single place for people to manage their entire financial life. Dexter, you think of your own personal circumstances, you tend to have an app for each problem in your financial life or enabling that. We've tried to bring all that together. The idea being kind of one app, all things money. So that's really been our focus for the last few years.
Now, your role, you're Australia, New Zealand CEO. We're kind of going to talk a little bit more, but we're actually celebrating a 5-year anniversary with Revolut, I think, this month. Before we kind of go into what the last 5 years has been about, maybe as if you could tell us just a bit more about Revolut, your kind of customers, size of the business, how long you've been around, but also how that ties into the bigger Revolut business as well.
Yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, as you say, I joined 5 years ago, so yeah, it's almost hard to believe that's gone incredibly quickly. But yeah, when I joined the business, we had 3 or 4 people on the ground. Australia was the first expansion market for Revolut outside the UK and Europe, and so in a lot of ways, we've had to forge some paths in terms of growing our business. But if I kind of fast forward to where we've got to on that, we've just clicked over a bit over 800,000 customers using the Revolut app. Incredibly diverse customer base. Early on, we saw a big skew to younger early adopters. But as we've diversified the product and probably expanded the use cases, we're seeing a much broader demographic of people kind of drawn to the app. We extended that to cover small businesses as well, 23. So that was a big step forward. And overall, we've seen, transaction volumes and growth, new customers, about a 77% increase year on year, and payments, people actually engaging with the app and using it has increased close to 85%. So it gives us a lot of confidence to continue to invest in everything that we're doing.
Yeah, so Revolut, I think it's its 10-year anniversary this year, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So, it's hard to believe the company's as young as it is.
I think you need to put some numbers in context around that because they're pretty incredible.
Yeah, I guess the headline is we've just pushed through 50 million customers globally.
It was only 40 million 2 weeks ago, wasn't it?
I know. It's quite amazing, isn't it? It's, But yeah, operating across more than 30 markets. I guess the sources of growth have been, on one hand, continued expansion of product features and attracting new customers that way, but also pushing into new markets. Our founders, to their credit, could have easily have just consolidated down on core markets in UK and Europe. We had an incredible business there, but they have gone on to towards this real mission of building the world's first truly global bank, and as a result expanded in a whole bunch of new markets, Asia Pacific, Latin America, US itself. So yeah, it's been huge.
I mean, one of the criticisms that's been labelled at businesses like Revolut has been, well, they're not profitable, they don't generate revenue. That's not a claim that can be laid at Revolut.
No. So, at group level, we've been profitable now for a few years and very meaningfully in the last published financial year. Even in Australia, we've got through to standalone profitability. That was a really important milestone for us in the last 12 months. There's something psychological about standing on your own 2 feet, organically generating capital to sustain the business. And I think that's particularly true if you fast forward for us a little bit to becoming a bank in the future, being able to prove that the business model can stand up, it's resilient, and as I said, that we're generating our own capital now.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you make, Matt, because I think one of the things that, well, there are a lot of things that I admire about Revolut, but I think the thing that's really kind of stood out to me has been their approach to Australia, particularly when you see so many others who've come and gone internationally who kind of think, hey, it's just about putting boots on the ground, and they don't really appreciate the challenges and the complexity. And to see that long-term commitment to the country, I think there's very, very few who have had the chops to actually do that and stick by it and see it get to the point that you need to, where you kind of get profitability and you kind of look at your numbers. You're doing what ING took 20 years to do, right? So it's kind of without mortgages, so it's pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, and look, we've learned a huge amount. I think it was probably a mindset a little in Revolut early on that you could do the desktop analysis out of London, send a launcher team down, light the fuse, everything would go well. And we learned early on the importance of putting a really strong local team on the ground, hire a great CEO, have them develop a strategy that's oriented around the local market. Things like what's the local consumer nuance, what's the competitive landscape, what's the competitor reaction likely to be as you launch, but have them develop that go-to-market strategy, build their great local team, and then go about executing on the product roadmap. You really want people waking up in the morning and thinking about, how am I going to make the Aussie business great? And I think that's kind of underpinned some of the success that we've seen over the last couple of years.
What's also, I think, really kind of insightful, for me, and I'd like to share with the listeners, has just been, the evidence of the long-term approach, having been involved in your hire and knowing what the remit was, and eventually the view of getting a banking license, setting that kind of expectation day one, really then changed fundamentally the type of person that you need to bring in as CEO. Now, we're 5 years on, and news is there could be a Aussie banking license on the horizon in the not too distant future. What have you seen kind of around the best approach to go around building a digital bank in Australia? Because the reality is you've outlived 2 competitors who did go and get, or 3 competitors that went and got digital banking licenses first and then built the bank.
Yeah, what I'd say is I think that business model of putting a team together, building the tech, raising the capital, applying for the license, but then only having the opportunity to market test at the point at which the license is granted, that's a really hard business model to make work from a standing start. So early on, we took the view that we wanted to almost build a beachhead in payments and a viable business in its own right. And geez, that's a great jump off point to becoming a bank in the future. You got an existing customer base; they're very engaged with the app already. In terms of what we've seen around some of the transaction growth, even things like the subscription plans that we offer. I remember coming in really kind of being skeptical as to, is that something that's going to really land in Australia? Aussies, high value seekers, need to be really convinced that there's value there before they'll take something like that on. And again, we've just seen that part of our business continue to grow, partly because we can prove there is real value there for people. But I think that business model of having an existing business as a jump off point and a profitable one makes a huge difference. I think the other is being really oriented towards what consumers want. And look, I know I'm in this privileged position of having a pretty awesome product catalog to call on from the UK and Europe, and being able to learn some of the lessons they have early on. But again, I think having great tech, being able to ship features pretty rapidly. I think we've launched more than 20 features over the last couple of years. So really built the proposition out, and as a result, you really start to challenge what people would expect from their bank. Example I used a little bit is something we've launched in Europe, which is Revolut Stays, which is an accommodation booking service. So an ability for your app to offer a service like that is not something people would typically expect from the bank. And so as a result, you're starting to drive differentiation. It's not just about where am I going to land my salary and I'm going to offer a mortgage and I'm going to reprice that over time. It's a much broader business and more sustainable as a result.
It's been really fascinating to see how rapidly technology is developing, and it seems like every day there's a new buzzword or technology or hype cycle that kind of everybody's jumping on. And whilst fintech kind of may have seemed to have had its moment, I get the sense now that what we're seeing is a real maturity within the fintech space. Look, mate, whilst we've seen the news of DeepSeek and how kind of 5 people have done what thousands couldn't with billions and billions of dollars of investment in the US, I think ultimately the kind of moat for fintech is that the level of complexity, particularly around risk, compliance, treasury management, and all of those things, once, business like Revolut, who's invested the last 10 years in building all of that infrastructure and systems and investing heavily in risk compliance and all of those things, I think it's really hard now for any startup to come and go, hey, we're going to be the next Revolut.
Yeah, I think I'm still really optimistic about the sector. I think there's still some big problems to solve, and some of the fundamentals haven't really changed over the last few years. There's still a massive concentration in the big 4. I don't think they serve Aussie customers as well as they could. They certainly haven't innovated in terms of product, and so you do need to play to your strengths a little bit there in terms of the agility, having enabling technology that does reduce complexity, being really oriented to what consumers want, and again, reducing that complexity, giving them insight into their finances in a different way, and frankly, features that help them live their life differently. So I still remain really optimistic about that. I don't underestimate that, and having lived through the last 5 years, even with being part of a kind of bigger group, I can see some of those challenges. Access to capital in Australia, it's a Finnish market. Banking, as you've said, is proved to be a pretty tough nut to crack from a standing start. So there's some headwinds there, but fundamentally, I think the real opportunity is the generational shift that's still happening, which is people much less wedded to the incumbent banks and much more open to solutions that actually align with how they live their lives. So that's the thing to go after, I think.
I was amazed to find out actually recently that Australia, I think, is the 5th largest in the world in terms of outbound remittance. Have you been able to tap into kind of the heavy immigrant population that we've got here in Australia? Who I remember when I arrived 21 years ago, and it was like I went to ANZ Bank, and that's kind of because that's all you knew, right? Whereas now I think, wow, like first thing I'd be doing is getting a Revolut account if I haven't already got one, and sending money back home and being able to kind of send money from the UK over to pay my rent and those things.
100%. That initial hypothesis around the size of the remittance flows, and combined with, because of the market structure in Australia, effectively an oligopoly, Australians being pretty poorly served, that's just very fertile ground for Revolut to come in and disrupt that. And that's what we've seen in terms of the flows. I think people are becoming more aware of the hidden costs of those things. So it tends not to be in the transaction fees. It's the bid offer spread. It's the difference between the wholesale rate and the rate you're either buying or selling. And that's harder for people to quantify because they don't necessarily have access to all of it. we've tried to be as transparent as possible around that, and I think it's served us well, alongside making that as seamless as possible. So the fact you can transfer peer to peer to a network of 50 million customers globally pretty seamlessly. It's not a case of waiting 14 days for the money to drop. It's there instantly. And again, that's, I guess, the virality of the product. Helps a lot in terms of, as we build out the global business. I think that just becomes more and more appealing.
And if the day comes when you do get an Australian banking license, what does that then mean for the product suite that Revolut will be offering?
Yeah, so I think, and we really orient ourselves around, the importance of the bank license is enabling those additional services to customers. There's lots of add-on benefits for the business, but at its core, that's what it's about. And one aspect of that is obviously things like interest-bearing savings, people being able to earn interest on when they park their money with us. I think that's one element. And I think credit's the other. So, if you look at the non-bank sector, and that's much bigger in Australia than it is in lots of other markets, and I think, that's a good thing. I think over time you see that those guys can struggle with, markets either retreating based on economic conditions. And so a bank license gives us continuity of the funding source, and that means we can offer a more expansive suite of credit products and know that, we can stay in the market, remain competitive, all those types of things. So overall it's pretty transformational for us. The final leg of that is a bit harder to quantify, and that's, there's a big trust question attached to being a bank. People know that you're held to a really high standard, and we think that's going to help us overall. Being held to that standard, people knowing that they can trust us, and as a result, grow the business overall, serve more customers.
And so Revolut Home Loans, is that something we might see on the horizon?
Well, we launched mortgages in other markets. Bit to think through there. It's obviously ultra competitive in Australia. And we tend to focus in on areas that are, where consumers are really underserved. But it's part of the market's pretty hard to ignore. It's big and, profitable. So
and the bit that you mentioned about the stays piece as well, I think what's really been fascinating for me is to see the super app in action on an actual nation or an economy. And, I was in Bali last year and I hadn't been for about 10 years. And the big difference for me was Grab. You all of a sudden you got people who've got their own businesses and it's jumping on the back of a moped or it's getting food delivered. But the economic freedom that's given people now, and you kind of look at Revolut as being like almost like the next step up from that, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to, imagine getting a mortgage through Revolut and I'd say, hey, I think I might stick it on Airbnb. You kind of got your one-stop shop, right?
Yeah. I think it's the definition of enabling technology.
Yeah.
It making finance accessible and simple and reduce the friction out of it. Even things like offering merchant terminals, I think that's been part. There's just been very high barriers to entry, extremely expensive. Again, that's something we've launched in other markets and making that more available to small businesses so that they can, a freelancer can run a business where they have a terminal if they need it and can build their customers using all of that.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right, Dexter. I think that new technology, particularly in developing countries, but also more established ones, I think really opens the door to small business.
Absolutely. And kind of for you and I, financial freedom meant working for a long time, building up a nest egg and then hopefully one day retiring early. Whereas I think for younger generations, financial freedom means very, very different things to kind of what we maybe, as we were growing up, thought it might mean. And the reality is that, kind of in the Western world, our average population's about 45. And if you look at areas like Southeast Asia, Africa, their average age is 25. So you kind of look at the size of these opportunities globally, right? And the kind of movement, I think, our idea of financial freedom is probably kind of a rear view mirror view of it, which would explain why you're putting on 10 million customers from the time that I wrote the show notes to the time of recording the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I think there's this once in a generational shift that's happened in terms of what people want, in terms of support on their finances, and it's much more around integrating with the way they live their life. A key takeout from COVID, and I think this trend has continued, is, as an example, people being much more self-directed about their wealth. They don't hand off to a fund manager or a broker.
Yeah.
They want to do it themselves. They want to know what their net worth is. They want to be able to actively engage in that. They want to access alternative asset classes that they may not have been able to previously. Crypto is an example, but that covers all sorts of things, shares in different markets, things like commodities. So yeah, I think making that accessible and then giving people clarity as to where they're up to in their financial lives, I think that's key to the unlock, I guess.
Yeah. Now I want to talk a little bit about yourself, Matt. A few things that really distinguish you from other people in my network, I think, is, first of all, your kind of background as coming from the traditional banking space. When I've collected data, I think about 90% of people who make that move from a big four bank or a traditional bank into a business like Revolut tend to be gone within the first 6 months. The other is that startup years, I think it's commonly kind of appreciated, are probably like the equivalent of dog years. And so, you kind of we're sitting here and you're celebrating 35 years at Revolut. So kind of what I really want to dive deep onto is kind of, first of all, kind of what are those qualities that put you in the 10% and not the 90%? And then what are the qualities that now are putting you in the 1% of the 1% who have been able to kind of go on the growth journey with the business as well?
Yeah, they're great questions, Dexter, and it's obviously for a bit of self-reflection. But I guess I was maybe a little bit unique in that alongside the banking, I'd had 10 years at Virgin, so it's that real injection of entrepreneurialism, orientation towards consumers, what they want. That comes directly from Richard. I had the opportunity to work pretty closely with him when I was at Virgin for all of those years, and so went into banking with that lens attached. And in some ways, I think the time in banking grew me up a bit. It was a big team I was running, it was sort of more than 3,000 people, and then when I stepped into the CFO role, worked out how to run a balance sheet and everything else that comes with it. So yeah, but I think the steepest transition was still the move into Revolut. And that was for a few reasons. It was less about the subject matter and more about the ways of working, and really challenging myself to, how did I go about leading the team and developing the strategy and everything else? And one part of that is absolutely a need to roll your sleeves up and orient towards action first and foremost. I think one thing I'd say about banks, they're fantastic at doing the colourful PowerPoints. What they're not great at is then converting that to action. What am I doing this quarter that moves me towards my true north or where I'm trying to get to? I guess I've always had a bit of that. I always much preferred being a producer and being in the trench with the team. And so that came a bit more naturally to me. But there were other things that did have real steep learning curve to it, embracing the tools that Revolut used to, it's almost the rails on which the firm run. And that's akin to a software developer, very heavy use of Jira and roadmaps to define what are you doing for the next fortnight. We've got some incredible, internally proprietary technology that we use for everything from kind of performance management all the way through to recruitment and the like. And that's incredible, but you really do need to embrace that. And something I say to each new joiner is you're going to feel like you're in a washing machine for the first 3 months. Everyone goes through that. The key is your own persistence and having a curious mind, being willing to self-develop, I guess, work the answers out. And you'll find 3 to 6 months in, there is no other way of working, and you can never go back. I've always challenged myself to think, if I ever step back into a corporate, what would I do? I just, to your analogy, I don't think I'd survive 6 months. It'd be just be too different now to what I've become familiar with. They're probably a few of the key parts.
Yeah. Another thing that makes you really unique, Matt, is you've worked very successfully with two very, 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 very successful entrepreneurs. And, that isn't an easy thing to do. A lot of people would find that too challenging. What is your secret to success of being able to kind of take things on the chin that you got to take? And people with big, bold visions who are totally action oriented, and sometimes you can feel a bit like you're in the kind of slipstream of that. How have you adapted your style, and what are the tips that you could share with other people who really want to kind of grow and kind of experience what it's like to work with an exceptional entrepreneur, but maybe is kind of a little bit concerned that they might be they might get a little bit offended or not have the kind of the grit that's required to do that?
Yeah, I think probably, and I don't have the perfect formula by any means, but I think the things I found helped me a lot. One, early on, created the space to be clear around what our strategy was going to be. And I think in startups and fintech, that almost feels like a luxury, to be honest. It's so much, what am I doing this quarter? Let's get on with it, rather than stand back and think, actually, how do we want this to unfold? What are we going to prioritize early, but what's important over the long term? And Nick and Vlad's credit, they were really patient about that to begin with, in terms of us defining who we were going to go after, what we were going to offer them, and as a result, what would that create? So I think that was one part, but that definitely needs to be paired with momentum and a sense that you're building confidence in the business you've got going, and that's multifaceted. That's quality of people, how they're showing up in their interactions. It's results on the board. Frankly, I think that's really important. Ability, shit is going to go wrong. It's what you do about it. That sounds really trite, but it really does matter. So there's lots of issues that will come at you. It's then how you respond as a team. And that kind of links back then to the importance of strategy, being clear on where you're heading and being able to anchor back to that. I think the other, and maybe a bit more unique to Revolut, maybe not, is being really fact-based in your decision-making. Draw on evidence to demonstrate you've thought deeply about it. You've got a hypothesis, but you think these things prove it out, and this is how you're going to monitor from here. So I think that's a real DNA within Revolut is democracy of the best idea, and it being really fact-based.
Yeah. I think the thing that really stands out to me about Revolut, and I was asked this question, I get asked this question a lot actually, say, what is the thing that you see that makes that extra success? And I think it's just the absolute, almost like stoicism of the founder in their vision and their belief. And it's a big, bold, ambitious problem that everybody is going to say you're never going to do it. And they are just absolutely resolute, and they don't. I remember watching a documentary about Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, and Jimmy Iovine said the reason why most people don't get what they want is because they don't. They're not wearing blinkers. You got to be like a racehorse, right? Have those blinkers on and just kind of. And I think that's kind of the thing that I've noticed is, that permeates all the way through, like where you've said with fact-based decision making. Around every process that you've got, the kind of meticulousness of the UX, the kind of meticulousness around product development and feature rollout and all of those things. It's kind of, it's almost like you see the CEO is still, and the founder is still in the DNA of everything that comes through Revolut.
100%. And that, again, I think that's the real benefit of being a founder-led, and frankly a private business as well, is you can cut through all of that and the planets do revolve around that clarity of vision of what we're going after, and then translating that to, well, what are we going to focus on next? And even as the complexity's grown, I've seen Nick and Vlad stay incredibly hands-on and focused on really what matters in all of that. I think the things that go alongside it, holding the bar really high on talent, not compromising. I think it's easy early on in a startup. I know, in Australia it was like this. You're really pushing your proposition to have people attracted to it. It's not, people aren't just drawn to the brand. You need to demonstrate how you're different. And so, I think
I think if you remember our conversation, first one, I was almost talking you out of the job, right? And it wasn't to try and dissuade you. It was just to be transparent about, look, I don't want to be replacing this in 6 months' time, right? Like, and I think I used the words to you, hey, it'll probably be 18 months and I'll be the greatest 18 months of your life.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing to see that it's gone way beyond that. I think this is what a lot of people miss about hiring for these types of businesses and this stage of business, is that if you're transparent and you're clear and you focus on people who share the vision and have those qualities that you've talked about, then there's no reason why they shouldn't be with a business for 5 years and have the capability to grow along with the business. And I think that's, one of the key learnings that I've had from the experience of working with yourself, Matt, is just that, hey, look, it doesn't have to just be that it's going to be 18 months to get you to this point. If you find the right people, they'll grow as the business grows as well.
Yeah, you're right. I think the expectations being set of what it is likely to feel like when you land and the steepness of that transition and everything that goes with it, they're really important conversations to have early on.
Yeah.
I think the second is that there's an active discussion around the motivators. So what is it that's drawing you to this? And I know you probably remember we talked about Revolut. It was, one, the market opportunity, once in a generation opportunity to have the breakout consumer bank in Australia was one. Two, an ability to have personal impact. How am I making a difference? Having sat in a bank where you're a cog in the wheel, flipping that to, sure, I'm third, fourth person on the ground, but geez, that gives you an opportunity for a big personal impact. And then the final was just wanting to re-steepen my own growth curve, learning a lot around what, how do technology companies function and how are the ways of working different to what I'd experienced. And they're all the things that keep you super interested and motivated and engaged.
Now, it's not just yourself who's been with the business for 5 years here on Oz, but the exec team as well. What's been your, kind of what were the qualities that you looked for that have obviously led to having such a successful kind of, founding team?
Yeah. So again, that hasn't changed too much over time. I think one would be that action orientation. So I guess what I go looking for is someone able to articulate the track record of outcomes they've had in previous roles. So it's not about size of team, breadth of responsibilities, the committees or the governance forums they sat on, much more around what did you do personally that shifted the dial, that created a difference. I think the other aspects to that are, go looking for people who like the clarity of knowing what success looks like. So they tend to be pretty goal oriented, fairly metricated in how they think about things, like the clarity of that, dislike the subjectivity that can sometimes come in corporates. And then the others would be some big transitions in their career. Because, I think that the test is always, particularly people who've come out of banks and corporates, it's never about the subject matter. It's always about, can they adapt to a different way of working? Can they rewire themselves to, it's not do the job, be successful in Revolut from the start. And then the final is a little softer. It's almost their motivation in wanting to be part of the mission. I think that's what's really helped us in Australia, is this sense of we're doing something pretty special. This is a once in a career opportunity. and I can see the personal impact that I'm having. If they're motivators versus money or large teams or big broad responsibilities, I feel we're in better territory, and that tends to mean longevity of tenure. They're more engaged for longer than if they're motivated by some of those other things.
Yeah, it's really interesting your point about that adapting to the environment, because I think that's actually the number one reason why people don't last if they make that move. And when I've interviewed and done all the research on it, Matt, there's two things that clearly kind of happen. So the first is, as you mentioned, you're in the washing machine for the first 3 months, right? And that's stressful. You're having to unlearn what you've learned and learn new skills. And in any walk of life, any person that does that will make a lot of mistakes. And unfortunately, in the environment that they've come from, if you make a mistake, you either get punished for it through you don't get your bonus, you don't get promoted, or you might get sacked. And so it's kind of almost like survival mechanism is, how do I hide this, or how do I blame someone else? And of course, when we're all under stress and pressure, we go into survival mode. And the people who are able to adapt or able to get beyond that kind of, the kind of fight or flight, kind of mode of thinking, and back into critical thinking, and kind of take a step back and go, okay, I've screwed up here. How do I fix this? And I think that's the number one thing that, you touched on this as well, that helps people make that transition, is to, first of all, be really aware you're going to make lots of mistakes. 2, not to go in with the belief that mistakes and failure is cool, because it's not, right? Accountability is cool, and making shit happen is cool, right? And I think that's the kind of dot that people miss is, look, we're kind of not seeking to fail, but if we do, let's not worry about it. Let's move forward very quickly and fix things.
Again, you're right, Dexter. I think everything you said kind of resonates with what I experienced when I was sitting in a bank, which was, who's going to launch the coronial inquiry and the chance starts and all the rest of it. Of course, that drives behaviour, right? Bad news travels slowly. People go looking for someone else to carry the can on things that might have happened, versus an environment where actually it's about the learning experience. What do we take out of that is going to mean we do better in the future? As you say, taking accountability quickly for it. And in particular, I'm big on bad news traveling as quickly as good news. It's not a theatre for success all of the time. Stuff's going to happen that needs to move pretty quickly so we can do something about it. And of course, we've had our fair share of those types of things. But that's a really important cultural setting. And as you say, takes quite a bit of getting your head around and stepping into an environment like that that might be different to what people, particularly out of banks, might be used to.
Right. I've got the billion-dollar question for you now, Matt. So you've worked with some of the greatest entrepreneurs that we've ever seen in, our lifetimes. You've worked with some great businesses, currently working with one. We talked about the rapid change of technology, and we talked about, hey, what is the opportunity for fintech startups now? If you were going to be backed to go, at the end of your Revolut days and go and do something new, what do you think that opportunity would look like, and what would be the type of business that you would want to build?
Well, that's a really big question. I think it's going to sound a bit general, but I still think this space in consumer banking is wide open, and I think the tailwind, obviously, for me, comes back to people wanting something different from their provider of those services. And in Australia, I think the triumvirate is sort of, great experience, a product that's integrated with their lifestyle. And fundamentally, Aussies are value seekers. They go looking to see that they're getting a good deal. And I think if you can meet each of those criteria, I think you're a good start. And then all the enablement of that has to be great tech. I see fintechs pull technology solutions off the shelf. And again, this is a really privilege. I'm in a position of privilege to being able to say this, but pull technology solutions off the shelf and wonder why it doesn't help in their differentiation. So I think that's one, is making sure that, you know, you're investing the right amount in that enabling technology. I think that's one. And two, it again, it sounds so trite, it's all down to the talent. It's the type and quality of people that you draw in. And I reckon that's like the 90% factor on whether you're going to be successful or not. Because of course there'll be challenges. You know, we had COVID thrown at us very early on in Revolut. I don't think if I'd been surrounded by a lesser team, we would have navigated that in the same way. And I'm just convinced it made us a better business. It diversified us. It accelerated into our roadmap in a different way. And if that team hadn't been there, I think we probably would have struggled. So yeah, I don't think there's a particular sector or segment or, you know, product idea or anything like that. I think it's more getting the fundamentals right of the offering and yeah, being really disciplined then in how you build towards that.
We're coming to a wrap up. Before we do, what can we expect from Revolut Australia in 2025?
Yeah, so big year ahead. You know, it's funny, you cross the finish line of 2024. Some great milestones for us in that one, but it's almost like start afresh, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's not the finishing line, it's the start going off again.
It's somebody once put it to me very eloquently. It's like jumping out of a plane without a parachute every day.
a bit like that. A bit like that.
Yeah.
But you know, I think for us,
and you're flying the plane and trying to build it at the same time.
Exactly. And the wings are missing, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think for us, continue the A grade team build out. You know, we're still hiring at pace. There's a big focus around being kind of bank ready, bank grade in terms of the team and the roles we've got live. So I think that's a big one. Continue that work. Our product roadmap is I think the features we have coming in the pipeline is probably going to be the most expansive for us in the 5 years that I've been here. So, you know, I think people can expect the Australian version of the app to get much closer to what's offered in UK and Europe in terms of features. So that will include everything like embedded travel insurance, a richer loyalty program, but also some of the things I'd regard as hygiene. So, you know, getting our domestic payment integrations complete. You know, we just got our own BSB, fully integrated our own solution on NPP, PayID, BPay, Pay2, that's all coming. So yeah, a really big push there. And then, as I said, I think there's a lot of focus around bank readiness. So cannot put a timetable on that, but that would obviously be a really important strategic unlock for us as well.
Well, Matt, we get some awesome talent listening to this podcast. If they're interested in careers at Revolut, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so jump on the website, revolut.com, ENAU careers, and we've got a pretty active LinkedIn profile as well. So either of those two options will give everyone a good sense of roles happening and reach out to our recruiting team.
And I don't think there'll be anybody who's listening to this who hasn't already downloaded Revolut, but if they haven't, where can they find the app?
Yeah, App Store, Google Play. You can download the app or jump on our website and all the links are there as well, revolut.com.
Well, Matt, amazing to catch up again. Thanks for all your insights. Congrats on the 5 years. Good luck with navigating 2025. And I can't wait to get you back on the show when the license is here and you can make some big announcements about what's next.
Look forward to it, Dexter. Thanks again for having me.